How Harry and Meghan are going their separate ways, what Catherine revealed about her secret competitive streak, and why our own Rebecca English had an embarrassing moment this week involving Prince William and a bag of frozen spinach. We've got another bumper show for you. Hello and welcome to Palace Confidential, your weekly look at all things royal. I'm Jo Elvin and here to discuss the big stories are the Daily Mail's royal editor Rebecca English and the paper's diary editor Richard Eden. Welcome to you both. Now, a reminder before we get going that if you want more royal news and views, make sure that you subscribe to our channel. It's free and you'll never miss another episode of Palace Confidential. So, let's get cracking. Let's kick things off with the Princess of Wales, who was sporting a plaster over two of her fingers this week. Rebecca, that's not very royal. A plaster, what happened?
Well, she was on a quite serious visit, actually, to Highdown Prison in Surrey to talk to prisoners and to charity there about the work they do in helping people overcome addiction and mental health issues. But obviously, as she arrived, we immediately spotted that she had two of her fingers strapped up, and she was actually asked about it by some of the people there.
Which two fingers?
I think there were these two fingers.
Okay,
yeah.
Thank you. I like
you
accuracy.
Like detail.
Yeah.
And she admitted that she had actually been jumping around on the trampoline with the kids and had injured them. So, I think she's spoken about having a trampoline before in the garden, how the kids like to have a bounce on it before or after school. So I think it's quite endearing little story.
How does one's fingers get involved in a trampoline accident?
Trampolines are so dangerous, honestly. They really are. And adults, they're really not designed for adults. They're for the much smaller children.
But the trouble is, you want to relive your childhood and you can't resist having a go when you see them.
I remember jumping up on one once and then just falling straight through. And everyone was watching was just very confused for a second.
Please tell me they had a video of that.
No, this is the 70s. Videos weren't a thing. Now, I wanted to bring this up because Catherine's wasn't the only person close to William who sustained an injury this week, was she, Rebecca?
No, it's not been my finest week, I have to say.
Go on. Now, our own Rebecca English was spotted with a bag of frozen spinach on her foot while talking to Prince William. And that picture is up on screen now. Rebecca, try and talk us through it.
So, hence the sandals today that I'm wearing. Cut a long story short, I was racing out the door, worried I was going to be late for this engagement with Prince William yesterday. I was barefoot and managed to kick a very heavy metal object that had been placed in a very awkward part of my hallway. And
by whom?
Well, that's a matter of debate in my household
Mr.
at the
English,
moment.
by any chance?
It's a matter of debate in the household at the moment, as I said to William. I broke my toe, and I knew instantly I'd done it. But I had to get to this job because it was, well, you know what it's like, Richard. If you say you're going to do it, you're going to do it. So I crammed my foot into a pair of trainers and jumped on the tube. But it was quite a long journey to West London.
You're such a soldier.
Oh, come on. Hats off to Rebecca for getting to the engagement.
Well, it's the front line of royal reporting, isn't it? You know, people think it's just, drinking eating canapes and, drinking champagne.
And do they really have frozen spinach at a building site?
Yeah, by the time
How quickly was that produced?
By the time I got there, I was in a lot of pain, and then a nurse could see that, on-site nurse, and they said from a health and safety perspective, they needed to check you, like, you're right, your toe's broken, there's no way you can go on this construction site. But I said, well, I've got to do the job. So they got a chair up for me on the roof where he was talking to people about this really serious mental health issues. And someone said, we need to elevate it and get some ice. And the only thing they could find was a bag of frozen spinach. But as I said to William, you're in West London, which obviously has some posher areas of London, that it's not common or garden peas, it's spinach they have on site. And
there are probably simpler ways to make it all about you, Rebecca.
That's true. Even by my standards, that's pretty hard going, isn't it? Anyway, he spotted me and came over, was like, what on earth have you done? And actually joked to someone, you've got to get a picture of this, because now she's sitting there, she can't get away, and I can kind of bend her ear about a few things. It was very funny. I did joke to him, actually, and say, when he said, how did you do it? I said, well, in the interest of one-upmanship, I actually did a triple backward somersault on a trampoline. He went, you didn't, did you? I went, no, actually I didn't.
Richard, is it just me, or does Rebecca look quite regal in that picture?
What a picture! Come on. Look,
I think we must launch the Palace Confidential caption contest for this picture.
Rebecca's on her throne. It looks like Prince William sort of paying court to the to the monarch. I really think it was in my column today. We've got a story about William and Catherine advertising for a new all-powerful chief executive officer of their household.
Big
so
changes.
I really do think Rebecca should apply to that. She can clearly sort of tell him what to do.
I think I'm the last person they want. That was a really good story today, Richard.
Yes, tell us more.
Yeah.
Well, it's very interesting. It's a newly created position that, as people who follow these things know, the royals have private secretaries who are the ones in charge. They organise everything. But in this case, they're going to have a chief executive officer, which obviously sounds kind of very corporate, who will answer directly to William and Catherine and not to the private secretaries. So, you know, it's very interesting. And will it be replicated at Buckingham Palace, where traditionally you've got a court with lots of different courtiers? It really does seem like they want to shake things up.
So it sounds to me like they want to run it more like a business rather than this historical, traditional, I don't know, like, you know, I don't know, can't think of the word, sorry. But
yeah, well, royal family, you know, we kind of joke that we call them the firm.
Yeah.
So this really is sort of turning them into a firm.
What do you think, Rebecca? Do you think it will work?
Well, I suppose they have these positions anyway, but they have these kind of grand, you know, centuries-old title like Keeper of the Privy Purse, Lord Chamberlain, who is effectively actually the CEO of Buckingham Palace, the master of the household. So, and actually the Prince Charles, when he was Prince of Wales, he did have his own master of the household. They don't have it. But I think it's really fascinating that rather than appointing their own master of the household, they're advertising, as you know, Rich has brilliantly spotted, for a CEO, because you're right, it sounds much more purpose-driven and, you know, and modern and, you know, in executive.
Do you think there's any names coming into view who might be candidates?
Well, they're obviously aware of some tensions at the palace because the job specification makes clear they don't want anyone with a big ego. So, I mean, personally, I would have thought you need quite
Good luck with that.
Yeah, you need quite a big ego to be the sort of person that can drive through whatever they want to do. I would have thought it would be quite a corporate type person, unless maybe they've got someone in mind. I mean, they already have a CEO of their Royal Foundation. That's Amanda Berry, I think, who was at BAFTA before.
Yes.
You know, so it could be someone like that. Maybe there's other candidates. But
Prince Andrew's bored right now, isn't he?
God, can you imagine what a story that would be? My goodness.
Let's start that rumour. And Rebecca, though, the royals are seemingly back to work.
Yeah, so it's just it's that median time. So obviously the King and Queen is still very much based in Scotland. We have seen the King do some engagements in Scotland this week. But from Buckingham Palace's point of view, the focus is very, very much on the French state visit, which starts next week. So there'll be lots to chat about.
And you'll be limping along to that, won't you?
Well, that's my big worry. Is because they're packing in 21 engagements in 2.5 days.
You've got to hire that French mobility scooter, Rebecca.
What's French for frozen spinach?
what would so I'm slightly worried about that. But they really are packing in. So for more, it's preparation. But we have seen, obviously, the Wales is out this week. We've seen Kate. We've seen William. And actually, they're both doing a joint engagement today. By the time this programme comes out, it's embargoed at the moment, but they're in Hereford. So we are seeing more of a return to work, especially now the kids are back at school. They can get stuck in a lot more.
Well, there was one engagement, Richard, that looked quite fun, wasn't it? A podcast featuring not only the Prince and Princess of Wales, but also the Princess Royal, which is quite a rare thing. But let's start with William and Catherine, because there was that really great exchange about their husband-wife rivalry.
It was very interesting. It's the podcast which is all about rugby.
Yeah.
It's hosted by Mike Tindall, his fellow former England international James Haskell, with another presenter. It's very interesting, but it's quite specialist about rugby. But this time, they're invited to Windsor Castle ahead of the Rugby World Cup in France. And they were joined by Princess Anne, William and Catherine, talking about rugby. Obviously, they've got patronages there as well. All three of them do. And it was a really interesting discussion. In terms of William and Catherine, there was a lot of banter, a lot of joking, and yeah, they touched on their rivalry, and we've seen that before. Whenever there's anything sporting, whether it's
very sporty,
yachting or running or anything, they're always desperate to win the competition. And in this case, Catherine referred to their tennis matches, which she said are a nightmare because they won't. Neither of them likes to be beaten, so they'll start the match. Then whoever's losing presumably says, "Oh, come on, let's make it, best of 3." And so the matches drag on forever. So very sporty household, I think.
Yeah, I mean, Rebecca, it's fair to say there's a bit of a checkered history when it comes to royals and interviews on camera. It's never normally a great combination, but this seemed to be pretty genuinely lovely, didn't it?
I think that's what's nice. You could see actually how well the Waleses got on with Mike Tyndall. There's a genuine affectionate bond there. I thought Princess Anne was fantastic. I feel like there's a side to her that we haven't seen. I think Princess Anne, the chat show or something like that would be fantastic.
Ooh, yes.
She'd ask the questions that nobody else would dare to ask, I bet.
I quite like my job, Princess Anne. Can I keep this one? But yes.
And I thought she was great. And, little kind of insights into their life behind the scenes, Princess of Wales playing beer pong, who would have known that? Dare I say, I think I'd quite like to see a bit more of this, actually.
Absolutely. I mean, she did come across really well, Princess Anne, didn't she?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen her interviewed in the past. There's a very famous interview with Sir Michael Parkinson, who died recently, and she's done others. But this was, I think what made it different was it was kind of hosted by her son-in-law, Mike Tyndall. So she was very relaxed, and it was about a subject which she knows a lot about, rugby. She's been patron of Scotland rugby for decades. And she talked with great knowledge, very interesting, but also witty. And you just kind of feel like Princess Anne, she's one of those people who could get on with anyone. You could put up with anyone from different walks of life. She could have a good conversation. So she was very engaging, and clearly William and Catherine hold her in a great deal of respect. So
I wish I was friends with Mike Tyndall. I just feel like he seems like a really nice man.
He's clearly a good laugh.
Yeah, I like that. Well, let's move on because we've got lots more to come, including more on William and Catherine and the latest on the Duke and Duchess of Sussex in just a moment. But let's have a look at a couple of your comments now. You know we love getting them. We've had lots about our discussion and the montage on the anniversary of the death of our late Queen. If you missed that, head back after this and check this out because it's been a really popular one. Kat Thompson says, Queen Elizabeth II was, I believe, the greatest monarch history has and will ever see. I'm glad my life fell into this time. She is and will be greatly remembered. And sincere wishes to all her family at this time, especially to Princess Anne, who was the apple that fell very, very close to the tree. Meanwhile, Che Heng Gong says, Richard Eden's and Rebecca's recall of the cruel treatment of Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip is absolutely spot on. Unforgivable. Kathleen Ryan says, in her latter years, I think that the Queen had seen that the world had changed so much due to technology, etc. And she realised that people had different expectations of the royal family. King Charles is more up to date, and he's a people's king and is grooming William accordingly. I think that Prince Philip should be honoured too. I'd always admired both of them over the years, and they will never be forgotten. Lovely thoughts there. Well, let's turn to a fascinating piece now by the Daily Mail's Alison Boshoff, who revealed plans by the Sussexes to go their separate ways. Now, this isn't a new version of conscious uncoupling, but a separation of their personal brands. Richard, what do you make of this suggestion that Meghan wants to escape Harry's victim narrative?
Yeah, it was an interesting piece by Alison Boshoff, who is one of our great show business writers, so it kind of seems appropriate that she's writing about Harry and Meghan, who, let's face it, are pretty showbiz now, aren't they? And her point was that they're leading different careers, really. They're moving in different directions, and that's something we've seen happen. We've seen it in real time, with when Meghan, for example, had her series of podcasts. It was meant to be very positive. It was sort of feminist, interviewing various people, and Harry didn't appear at all. And she's starting to do things on her own. And then at the same time, we had Harry with his sort of victim narrative of his book, his memoirs, and all the interviews that went with that. And the suggestion is that Meghan doesn't want to sort of be sullied by that. She wants to be the more positive one who's sort of doing a positive feminist agenda and is not tarnished by the sort of constant whinging about family.
Gosh, that's quite strong, isn't it? What do you think of that, Rebecca?
Well, it sounds like it's probably a sensible business move, because although their projects in which they've bemoaned the royal family have been commercial successes, I'm not sure they've been personal successes for them as a couple. You know, we've seen their popularity plummet, I think, because people, while they've been fascinated to read them, don't really like the motivation for doing so. So it probably is, with all these new business advisors she's got, quite a sensible move. But then it does beg the question, where does Harry fit into this, and what is his going to be role?
Because they've been telling us for many a time that they're salt and pepper. They're a team.
Well, yes, and entwined like
those
the two palm trees. Yes, exactly. Yeah.
See, I do pay attention. Rebecca, Harry's plans to be a global philanthropist sounds lovely, doesn't it? Very, very noble. But how do we know how that will work in practice?
Well, I don't think we do, and that's the problem, isn't it? If you look at the Archewell website, there's a lot of, great phrases like compassion in action. But I think people have seen less of how that's going to work, apart from appearing at the odd event. Obviously, they have given certain grants to charities around the world, but there's been nothing really cohesive there. And I think that's something they really do need to work on. I mean, you've seen this week with Invictus. Invictus shows Harry at his best. So there definitely is a place for him, but I'm not sure he's quite found it yet.
Richard, in your newsletter this week, you've been comparing this approach with that of the Prince and Princess of Wales. What were your conclusions?
I think it is very different, yes. I mean, William and Catherine know the power of being a couple, of doing things together. We saw that on the podcast that we've just discussed. They were great, and they clearly work brilliantly as a couple. Yes, they have separate patronages and engagements, but they do a lot together as well. Whereas Harry and Meghan seem to be pursuing these different careers. So I'm not sure if that's a good move for Harry and Meghan or not. Yes, we've seen them come together. We've seen Meghan fly and join Harry at the Invictus Games this week after a few days, but she's made clear that's very much his project.
It's interesting, isn't it, because you wonder about whether their star power is better as singulars or combined.
Well, I think there's been a bit of a change in that, because I think, to start off with, they did see their power as very much combined, but as we've just discussed, it's not always gone entirely well for them, and that she sees her future lying in a different direction, which is funny, because you would have thought that being married to even an ex-member of the royal family would come with huge cachet, but I think that's a cachet they've actually squandered.
Just not huge cash.
No, that's true.
We need less cachet, more cash.
Yeah. Well, that's actually, it's a really good point, Joe, because that is a constant dilemma for them. How do they make that cash without losing the cachet and becoming a bit of an end of pier show type act? So so it's probably a very British phrase, actually, but hopefully that translates globally. It is a constant dilemma for them.
It's fascinating. Well, let's talk about the Invictus Games for a moment, because as you say, they are where Harry shines. It's his passion, but there's also been some criticism at the lack of appearance of other royals.
That criticism seems very strange to me, because it's always been Harry's baby. I'm not sure he'd appreciate it, frankly, if other royals started trying to get involved. It's been his project. The royal family obviously involved with lots of other sporting events, and also the Paralympics. We saw William and Catherine, lots of events at the Paralympics. So I think they've been happy to leave this to Harry. So I'm not sure that criticism kind of carries much weight at all, does it?
I thought it was a bit odd, Rebecca, because like Richard says, if I think of the Invictus Games, I think of Harry.
Exactly, and I'm not sure what it would lend to. I mean, it's a slightly difficult situation, because, of course, the royal family have such a very unique link with the military. And they did attend Harry's first Invictus Games. They supported him. I was there in London when he kicked it off. But after that, they just let him get on with it. And even now, more so as a former member of the royal family. I understand those that say, well, they should be more supportive of the military. But equally, I think they're damned if they do and damned if they don't. And if they came out in support of it, I'm sure there would be the usual naysayers saying you're trying to get popularity for yourself on the basis of what Harry's achieved. I just don't see how they can really win.
I mean, to me, it illustrates why it might be best for Invictus if Prince Harry steps back from it. You remember when we were talking about the Netflix documentary which he made? You know, I don't think it's been hugely popular, and I said I think it would have been better with a more neutral presenter. You know, if he stepped back, yes, he could say he's the founder and everything, but it's got others involved, then it wouldn't be so much his project, and maybe other members of the royal family, other people would be more involved.
And what did you make then of Meghan showing up at the end as well, and her role in the spectacle?
Well, I think it's interesting. I think she clearly, you know, wanted to make clear that, you know, all these rumours about the state of their marriage and that sort of thing weren't true. You know, we saw her make a speech to competitors. I think it was a sort of off-the-cuff type thing. We discussed last week how she didn't have that formal role. It had been announced that she would have some sort of formal role at the Games. They said that was a mistake and she'd never been planned to have one. But I think she was keen to show her support to Harry and sort of as his cheerleader, really.
Do you think, Rebecca, we could say this week has marked the big Sussex relaunch?
I think it's marked the big Harry relaunch, I have to say, because I do think, despite very fair criticism, Harry, over the last couple of years, as I said before, I do think Invictus is where you see the Harry of old and Harry shining. It's obviously
Harry's smiling. You just don't see that
he's
very
within
often.
a community that he feels comfortable with. He feels proud of them. They feel proud of him for the large part. So I think it's definitely will have done his credibility some good. I do see the rationale behind Meghan accompanying him. You often see William accompanying Kate on things that she's leading on and vice versa. I did find it a little strange that Meghan gave a speech at one of these events. I know it was a bit off the cuff, but you certainly wouldn't see that in the royal family if it was somebody else's baby. The partner would always let that other person take the lead and shine, and Harry did seem a little bit like a spare part on the stage there. But I think it's been good for Harry. I see why Meghan wants to support him, but I'm not sure it's the big relaunch for them as a couple. I think, you know, she needs to be doing something a bit more meaningful than just standing there for photo opportunities, to be honest.
When do you think we might see her website that's been long anticipated?
And the Instagram.
Oh yes, yeah. Is it Instagram or a website?
Well,
it's Instagram.
Yeah,
It's the major commercial project. So,
yes, we discussed that the other week.
We'll keep our viewers posted.
Well, it's montage time, and in honour of the start of the Rugby World Cup, here is a celebration of royals at, funnily enough, the rugby. Hope you see them at a few more games before the competition is over. That's all we have time for on Palace Confidential today. My thanks to Rebecca, Richard, and to you, as always, for watching. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.